So, aging, we're going to talk about anytime I try to learn something, I want to know its story. They actually teach you this in scientific publications. They're like, remember, every paper you write is a story. So, I like to call aging longevity to emphasize what we want out of it, not just the negative. In the research community, they insist on calling it aging, and they hate the term anti-aging because that term has been taken over by a lot of fraudsters. But we're going to look at the history. We're going to look at, like, we just call it reading, like the best entry points to read. And then we'll just have, like, some miscellaneous stuff, just as an intro. So, history of aging, like this. So, 1935 is when it really starts, and 1993 is when it really changed. So this is, what's his name? Is it McKay? I think it's, I'm rat dietary restriction. They starved some lab rats and their lifespan went up. In aging, we abbreviate lifespan LS constantly. So they starved lab rats, the lifespan went up, but it was like they had no idea that was possible and no idea how it worked. And we didn't even know what DNA was at that point. Like we knew nothing. We knew some stuff, but not much. Prior to this, there's actually a great one, maybe around 20 or so. Raymond Pearl. Rate of living. Super influential. In the 90s, it was still being debated in worms. Basically, like, is vitality an emergent property that Earth life has a limited amount of per unit of mass or surface area or something like this, or per organism? It's a very deep question. Similar and a bit tangent, like a bit even more indirect, but physicists are smarter than biologists generally. Physicists and mathematicians are like actually scientists. What is Life by Erwin Schrödinger is worth looking at. A physicist asks the question, what is life? Okay, so this is just some way back. So, and then you have you have myth too. Humanity, the first book is Gilgamesh, and it's about a guy. He's part god, part man. He's an arrogant king who bullies everybody. The gods are like, okay, enough. They make this dude Enkidu, who's like a red-headed monster dude, to be his buddy. They fight and they can't kill each other, and then they're like, we're friends. And then, long story short, Enkidu dies. Gilgamesh loses his mind and goes off in search of immortality. And he goes to the bottom of the ocean, finds some spiny flower, which is oddly specific, and then he brings it back up, and then a serpent eats it and steals it from him. It's just the first story in human history is about the search for immortality. It's a very old story. The Bible is full of it. Fountain of Youth. Frankenstein is a good one. Galvanism, the notion that electricity is what animates life. This is being resurrected by Michael Levin to a great degree. It's really important to know art, religion, and myth encode esoteric truth that cannot easily be communicated through scientific writing. So be aware. It also carries just raw energy. Like you watch Limitless and you get fucking amped up. You read Gilgamesh and you're like, it's just this dude is like a fucking dominant. So there's a lot of power in these stories, and you can use it to charge yourself up, and you move through the world. If you know all the stories, you understand people, and you can carry this power. It works. It's very, very valuable. So in 1935, we starved some lab rats. They lived longer. Nobody knew that was possible or how it worked. 1955, a couple things happen. We actually figure out what DNA is, and and then Denham Harmon proposes the first molecular theory of aging. It's the mitochondrial free radical theory of aging, or we'll just call it MFRTA, something like that. So basically, the way metabolism works, you take mostly glucose or fat. Either way, you chop it up through a long process into vinegar. They don't call it that in biochem, but that's what it is. It's acetate. They call it acetyl-CoA, but what they don't tell you is that acetyl-CoA is vinegar with a ginormous vitamin named coenzyme A attached to it. These are not two equivalent parts. This is a 2-carbon unit. This is a huge vitamin. So you chop it up in vinegar. You put it through the Krebs cycle, where you steal the electrons from vinegar, and you give electrons E-. You hand the electrons off to NAD. NAD becomes NADH, whatever. This is also where you make carbon dioxide, which is super important because that's what you breathe out. Anyway, you steal the electrons from vinegar, you hand them to NAD, and then this goes down to the electron transport chain. Which is in the membrane. This is where it gets complicated. This is where we're like, yeah, this is kind of how it works. So you have complex 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is what makes ATP, the only actual energy your cells really use. Oxygen is not fuel. Oxygen is just a catcher at the end of the line that catches the electrons. The electrons get passed down a magical iron sulfur highway of cubes that is extremely bizarre. It's all iron in here. Iron and oxygen, okay? And this is based in, like, I don't know, heme is in here somewhere. I can't remember exactly. But this is Denham Harmon's point. The engine that Earth life runs on is iron and oxygen, which is extremely oxidative and damaging. It's like we're still driving around Model T Fords that pollute everything. We should probably change it to vanadium or titanium or something cool, but we still have iron, and so therefore the life is basically, and somebody on Instagram criticized me, a physicist, for this terminology slightly, but life is the temporary localized overcoming of entropy via metabolism. Biology enclosed by a membrane, it takes stuff from the environment, steals its electrons, creates movement, and it uses this to, like, overcome the tendency towards disorder for a period of time within an organism. So the engine that gives you the energy to maintain order is what slowly kills you, because the engine is made of iron and oxygen. On the periodic table, in the top right of the periodic table, whatever it looks like this is fluorine. Fluorine is insane. It will steal an electron from anything it touches. Oxygen is second most insane. So oxygen is like just a crazy criminal that will steal electrons from anything. When you steal electrons from molecules, you damage them. So this is the first molecular theory of aging. It's basically pretty true. So I think a lot about cold fusion metabolism. How can we put low input, high yield, clean burning metabolism into our bodies? Like, you want to live on vapors, put out nuclear power plant levels of energy, and produce no waste in the process. I think about this a lot. We figured out DNA. We still didn't know what to do with it. The 1970s is when a lot of, like, evolutionary theories of aging came out. more or less. So a couple of note are disposable soma and antagonistic pleiotropy. These are just fancy terms for common sense ideas. Disposable soma just means evolution cares about you a lot until age 25, at which point you're expected to have a baby, and then there's no more selective pressure on you. Nature only selects for the things that get you to baby making, and then the selection acts on the baby. So after age 25, you just start unraveling slowly, because so you're disposable. After age 25, you're just coming undone at the seams because nature is not invested. Antagonistic pleiotropy means that many of the genes that get you to age 25 in a badass state have a negative effect on your long-term survival. This is a classic growth versus maintenance trade-off. A lot of aging is like growth and sex versus maintenance and frugality. mTOR is a great example of this. You take leucine, you take HMB, strong, but the growing is wasteful and dirty. HGH is another great example of this. The movie Cocoon in the 1980s is about human growth hormone. Before the 1980s, if you wanted to take GH, you had to get it from a dead human body, a cadaver. This was dangerous. I'm not going to say that, but it was dangerous. And in the 80s, they figured out how to make it recombinant in the lab, and they thought it was a fountain of youth because you take it and it makes your stem cells divide more, and you feel better. The problem is your stem cells have a finite lifespan, so if they start dividing faster, you feel better, but they burn out quicker and you die younger. So Cocoon is about human growth hormone. An alien cocoon lands in a nursing home swimming pool. The senior citizens swim in the pool, get rejuvenated. It's about growth hormone. It was wrong. 1993, worms, DAF2, mutate the insulin receptor, double the lifespan. This is like when everything changed. And from 93 through 2005, we figured out how fasting works through genetics. So basically, it's the holy trinity of aging, which is, you make a fucking crown or something. It's down insulin, down mTOR, up AMP-K. Of these three, this one makes you more badass and live longer. So that's kind of special. The other two kind of make you weak, but you live longer, more or less. This is when we figured it all out. Before this, it wasn't that great. When we cracked that, it was like, oh, we did. And it kind of in parallel to this is like telomeres and senescence. By the time you're 95, you're mostly a bag of dead cells being carried around by a few living cells. It's not good. So this is when everything changed. So it starts going like, it's kind of slow, and then here it's like, oh boy, this is happening. Here, 2013, 2014 is the next inflection point. A few things happen. Calico, this is like Google puts a few $1 billion into aging for the first time. The TAME trial, more or less, type 2 diabetics taking metformin were living longer than non-diabetics, and we were like, hey, can we just give some metformin to non-diabetics? Aging is not a disease. The FDA only approves drug trials for diseases. So they were like, aging isn't a disease. We can't test anti-aging drugs. Stupid. But the people in the aging field were like, aging is a disease, which is kind of disingenuous. It's not really a disease, but it kind of worked. They did the TAME trial. It got some traction. Long story short, aging is really, so human death works like this. About a quarter of it is atherosclerosis. About a quarter is cancer. Then you have some, neurodegeneration, diabetes, and then just a bunch of other stuff, whatever. This is the easiest thing to prevent. Cancer is harder. It's insidious. It's a lot of different diseases. But this is how human death works. And we treat each of these things individually. The geroscience hypothesis, which I think is also around this time, geroscience, maybe health span is around this time. And there's one more super important thing, hallmarks of aging. This is the point of entry. So if you treat aging is the biggest risk factor for every major killer disease. It's not smoking, it's not obesity, it's how old you are. The older you are, the more likely you are to die of a non-communicable disease. So if you treat aging itself, you treat all the diseases at once. So this is like the geroscience hypothesis, and the FDA was like, yeah, that's legit. Like that's kind of, that got the ball rolling. So Hallmarks paper is a Cell paper. It's in Cell Science Nature. If you publish in one of those, it's like going to Harvard, MIT, or Stanford. Called High Impact. There's a Cell paper in 2013 with like 50 scientists on it. They basically got together, defined what the different molecular aspects of aging are, what the best current treatments for them. It's a unifying point for the field where everybody could read this paper and be like, this is our current model of aging and how to treat it. So that's the best point of entry. Another great point of entry. So reading, you have Hallmarks. You also have Ageless by Andrew Steele. This dude is not a biologist. He's a young guy who came out of some other field, but he wrote the best book for the most part. It's just a very clear, very accurate overview. It's super useful. There's some, I also sometimes recommend like Laura Deming's FAQ as like a third type of source. There's a few other sources, but like these are the two major ones. You read these two, it's probably a bit dated by now. I've been out of academia, so the literature is probably passed me up in a few respects, but this is still, compared to what's in the public domain, this is like massively useful as an orientation. So that's like 10 years ago. What's happened since then? You know, I would say Brian Johnson. The thing that Brian did is he published a digestible, comprehensive, data-driven protocol. Here's all the things you do to maximize your chance of longevity. SENS is back here somewhere, Aubrey. Aubrey and SENS are legit. They got a lot of hate from scientists in a lot of ways. It is what it is. Everybody kind of worked it out, but it's hard to overstate the degree to which non-academic scientists can fail to appreciate the rigor involved in academia. There's also bullshit, there's careerism, there's even data faking at times, but like the rigor is serious. Like you read a ton of papers, you have to do a ton of experiments, you have to repeat them. You can't just like wing ideas. Winging ideas has a point. Like we figured out how this works based on a dude, just Peter Mitchell, just winging ideas. But in any case, yeah, so this is, Hevolution also happened. The Saudis put in like 20 billion. I don't know how that's panning out, but that was a big thing. This is like maybe 2023 or something. I think Nature published a specific aging journal, which is like a good sign. Lancet also. CRISPR happened like around here somewhere. It's been a slow, also 23andMe probably happened, which was not cool. Let's see, what else happened? Altos, Bezos put a few billion into aging. OSK, rejuvenation. This is a big one. That started in 2005 with Shinya Yamanaka. Basically, when an egg is an old cell, it's fertilized by a sperm, which is a young cell. The egg is like 20, 30 years old. Its epigenetic age is 20, 30 years old. But when a baby's born, it's new. Its epigenetic age is young. what happens. And whatever happens, can we apply it to ourselves as adults? Yes, you can. Shinji Yamanaka identified 4 factors: O, S, K, and M. And they go into the egg and they reset its epigenetic age to 0 5 days after fertilization. And then people were like, oh, for the love of God, can we put that in our adult bodies? Yeah, you can, carefully. O, S, K are the 3 that can be safely done. If you do too much of this or do it the wrong way, you can get cancer, or you can turn into a pile of undifferentiated stem cell jelly in real time, both of which can be lethal. So that's where a lot of stuff goes now, is OSK. Also, like replacement. You know, can you just grow parts and replace your parts? Yeah, you probably can. Replacement, you know, stuff that's, last I checked, replacement, cyborg stuff, AI empowering scientists, gene therapy. These things are like, basically the sci-fi is becoming real now. And also I would say decentralization. So like, it's very hard for large centralized institutions to keep up with this pace. Even if we assume the best, which they mean well, which in many cases they do. There's corruption everywhere, but like, the FDA, for example, was made in reaction to unsafe practices. It's designed to be reactive and protective. It's not designed to be like a cutting edge driver of innovation. So now we have like the genome's decoded, like we have AI, there's like citizens are empowered. FDA is not really designed to keep up with that. So if you decentralize science and you have these little cells of like operators, the question becomes, how do you keep the integrity high? You want freedom, it comes with responsibility. So it's up to people like us. If we're gonna get buck wild with, or whatever you want to say, we're gonna make moves, you ruin it for everybody if you don't have integrity and rigor. So if you want to not have to run everything through FDA, you have to keep an even higher standard. And it's worth it, and it's totally doable. There's a lot of ways to do it. Anytime you're doing something radical like that, if you're wired to do stuff like that, you want to err like 3-fold on the side of safety, because the intrinsic nature of your endeavor is still going to be radical no matter how safe you are. So that's where we're at now. I mean, it's, you know, AI is huge. You guys are part of this genetics effort. Replacement is crazy to think about, but like, you know, the human lifespan is like this. People do not appreciate this, but, you know, 120 is the hard mathematical maximum. So you got 40, 60, that's not, the 60 is in the middle. I'm actually pretty good at math, but we've been working hard. So 60's here, you got like 90, 30. Here's how human life works. You're fucking kicking ass to here, and then you start going down slow. But you're gaining wisdom and skill and stuff, so like your net vitality probably peaks like in your 40s or something. But then, like, man, it's not going so good. And then it starts to, like, it takes a downturn, and around 95, you're just like coasting, and you just kind of disappear. What governs this? There's a couple transitions here. This is like baby making, whether you have a baby or not. This is also relevant to NoFap. That's like a massive signal to your body, like mission accomplished, time to die. Deep topic, but whatever. This transition around here, some people think it's gut integrity, gut barrier integrity. There's some point around here where the windshield spider webs, and like one problem becomes 3, becomes 9, and now it's time to die. One way I think about this is try to find a 75-year-old with voluminous muscular thighs. It's hard. You'll see dudes who are still jacked up top, but like, look at the 100-meter dash world record time by age. Around 75, 80, 90, you just can't fake it anymore. Like you're coasting. Your body is done. So your body's made of cells. You can make the cells last longer, or you can increase the regenerative capacity of the cells. Both are valid. You can also just rewire like you can do anything. It's a creative endeavor. But the thing that people don't understand, there's a lot of things people don't understand, but if you're not gonna take some pills and some injections and do some creative biology, the only thing you can get is a more comfortable seat on this ride. You cannot get a different ride. This is the maximum amount of ride. You get a more comfortable seat. You cannot extend the ride unless you do genetics, you do stem cells, you do stuff like this. It is what it is. I've talked to thousands of people about this. Most objections fall into a few buckets, like what about overpopulation? I don't want to be alive, my friends and family are dead. The worst one maybe is you can't enjoy things unless you lose them. What kind of sick thinking is this? Like, you buy your kid a puppy and then one day in the middle of the night you just kill the dog and be like, you never would have loved that puppy if we hadn't stolen it from you. Humans have been forced to accommodate a limited biological situation. The greatest masters in human history, Leonardo, whoever you want to name, you get like 20 to 40 years maximum of mastery. That's not enough. That's incommensurate with the heights the human spirit is capable of. The one way that overpopulation, we have to steward technology. I mean, that just is what it is. None of this exists in a vacuum, politically, environmentally, whatever. I don't want to be around if my friends and family aren't. It's like they get the technology too. People are like, oh, okay. One way I convince a lot of people, and I don't have to convince everybody, and I believe in freedom, but don't step on my right to pursue this. I'll be like, do you like traveling? People are like, yeah, I love traveling. I'm like, what percent of the places you want to travel to, you think you're going to get to? They're like, oh, hardly any. I'm like, what if you go to all of them? They're like, and I'm like, and your friends and family could join you, and you're not part of some billionaire elite vampire class like everybody, and we don't destroy the environment. They're like, yeah, that'd be good. I'm like, there you go. That's as simple as that. And the option to die is always on the table. The option to live is not on the table. Better to have options. You can, we can also scientifically study the afterlife and the death process, which we have to a great extent. A lot of those books are up there. I'm not afraid of death. I would not mind understanding what death is a little bit better through scientific investigation before I just get thrown into it against my will. Maybe we could. There's a great movie, Flatliners, from the 80s, about a group of medical students who take turns rendering each other clinically dead, experiencing the afterlife, then reviving each other. It's a movie. They bring back ghosts, basically. It's like spooky, but it's cool. And science is, advanced societies should be scientific societies. Fearing technology, it's not a cohesive worldview. Nature was not good to us. It's very hard. Romanticizing the past, that's not, we didn't get electricity and oil until like 1900. After thousands of years of burning wood, and so, yeah, you get excited, you build all this stuff, then you realize, oh, this may be too much. That just happened. Like, we have Whole Foods now, we have Priuses and Teslas, like we are. Some people get too greedy, but like, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Space is good, you want to go to space, you want abundance, you want technology, you want to overcome biological dysfunction. If you've ever seen one of your family members die, it's not a Hallmark movie. It's terrible in most cases. So, a lot of ranting there, but these thoughts I think are important. Any questions or thoughts about aging and longevity?
Can you tell us about your personal work at Keeler Lanes and the contributions that you've made to the field so far?
Yeah, I was mostly a freeloader. I didn't do a whole lot. No, I'm just kidding. Matt, massive respect to Matt. Matt is a luminary in the field, and he is like a gadfly in the field, like Socrates. Rigorous, critical voice. He's extremely consistent, but also brilliant. So, Matt gave me a job day one with no biology experience. I was just like, yeah, just go. And I went. And I actually failed the first time, and then I came back and finally succeeded. But when I got there, I was very intimidated, failed out, came back, and the postdoc under whom I worked, Scott Weiser, who's a very successful and a scientist in his own right, and an excellent mentor. He was like, okay, we have this enzyme FMO2. It's the worm ortholog of this mammalian FMO3. The lab he was in at Michigan, a bunch of longevity interventions, rapamycin, dietary restriction, metformin, all these things. They all upregulated FMO3, and they didn't know what it did. FMO3 is typically thought of as an enzyme that metabolizes environmental toxins, oxygenates them to make them more soluble so you can excrete them in urine. But it appears that longevity interventions were turning it on, and it was acting on some metabolite that pre-exists in the cell, and was rewiring metabolism in some way. So he was like, you're point person on this, figure out what FMO2 does on its endogenous substrate. Oh my gosh, I was so ready for that. Did whatever it took. The first experiment I did was with a very toxic chemical. I didn't know how to do it. I was concerned. I went to Scott and I was like, how do I work with this chemical? He literally one of these, he goes, I was like, all right. So I ended up staying up all night, got the data done, presented it in a PowerPoint slide, brought it like a severed head to lab me. It was like, I got the data. I got addicted, like that feeling. I was like, this, I want to like hunt this. Like, to me, aging is something that killed my mom in slow motion with tremendous cruelty. I want to kill that, like brutally. I have a vendetta. It's a very motivating factor. So I did an experiment on FMO2. The hunt was like FMO2 acts on likely it's very obscure literature. I had to go through. The base of the pyramid is reading. So I just attacked the readings. I had a liberal arts background. So I read, brought Scott severed heads from the literature, hypotheses, we tested them. It grew and grew, and basically it was probably some sulfur-containing metabolite. I got super deep into sulfur amino acid metabolism. So you have homocysteine is a hub that gets made into methionine with B12 that attaches to the folate cycle. This is the famous MTHFR enzyme. Methionine gets made into SAM. That's all methylation. It gets made into acetylcysteine homocysteine. This is methylation. Boop, boop, boop. This goes back to here. It spits out adenosine, which is super important. You can push homocysteine the other way with B6 to cysteine, which goes to glutathione, or it can go to taurine. So I figured out a couple things, basically. A couple things. So my dissertation was called The Regulation and Function of C. elegans Flavin-Containing Monooxygenase 2. I know, like very sexy title. But basically, in worms, we have one freezer full of mutants of every gene and one freezer full of bacterial foods that knock down any gene one at a time. And we had a worm that glows green when you turn on FMO2. Genes work like this. There's a landing pad, then there's a gene, then there's a crash pad. So, like, the androgen receptor, like, it lands on certain genes' landing pads and turns them on. So we took FMO2's landing pad, we call it promoter FMO2, and we put it in front of green fluorescent protein, and then we put that in worm DNA. So anytime we gave the worm something that would turn on FMO2, the worms fluoresced green. And so I spent hundreds, maybe thousands of hours in dark room trying to turn on FMO2. So we figured out what turns it on. Basically, in worms, this is called SAMS1. If you knock this out, you turn up FMO2. So we're like, okay, it responds to that. And then, basically, all this reading, what I ended up thinking was two things. I had to request a paper from the Interlibrary Loan from 1955. They were like, we don't know the enzyme that makes taurine, but it uses NADPH and FAD, and it adds an oxygen. That's what FMO does. I was like, FMO makes taurine. I said that in lab meeting. A year later, a group in UK published that. It's true, it does make taurine, and it turns out taurine's a longevity molecule. Separate story about that, but what I really ended up thinking was the following. There's FMO really is very similar to a couple other major enzymes. but it's not described in concert with them often at all, if at all. FMO, DLD, which is super important, dihydrolipoamide dehydrogenase, and thioredoxin reductase. Basically, these all use FAD and NADPH, and I think they act as like oxidizing and reducing buffers in the cells that counterbalance each other. But really what FMO does, I think, FMO is a funny thing. They describe it in the literature as cocked and loaded. So FMO, it just kind of either releases hydrogen peroxide or oxidizes a substrate like a steady thing, like a heartbeat. What I think it's doing is there's a ton of glutathione in your cells. Glutathione is your primary antioxidant. FMO2, I think, oxidizes glutathione and messes it up at a low level, like, which keeps your cells slightly stressed all the time. And it stimulates the production of glutathione. And so I showed this in unpublished data. It's in my dissertation, but I didn't get published just due to time constraints. Basically, the hypothesis that would follow from that is that a worm without FMO2 will not have this hormetic stimulus to make glutathione. So it was like we used basically the glutathione synthesis enzyme and the glutathione reverse, like reducing enzyme, in combination with FMO2 knockout and FMO2 overexpressor worms, and the data fit our predictions basically exactly. So we showed like a loop of regulation and function. I'm forgetting the details a little bit right now, but it was, in my opinion, it was elegant and it was pretty strong. It was actually quite strong, if I'm being honest. We also showed FMO working here. So, you know, sulfur is super, all this is sulfur. This is sulfur amino acid metabolism. Sulfur is super important because on the periodic table, sulfur is the original version of oxygen on Earth. There was no oxygen in Earth's atmosphere originally. Earth probably started with these iron sulfur clusters on hydrothermal volcanic vents on the ocean floor. Gunther Waltershauser, German patent lawyer without a biology degree, 1992, left field, 125-page article, Iron Sulfur World, Origins of Life on Earth, said that first there were these magical iron sulfur cubes on the ocean floor, all organic molecules formed around them. Basically, sulfur is super ancient in life, it's super important. There's not much sulfur in cells, but when there is, it's really important. So this is sulfur amino acid metabolism. FMO's interaction with both ends of this being regulated by this end and then affecting this end and basically acting as because FMO is super ancient heartbeat that's controlling the steady production of these sulfur antioxidants. That was what my main contribution was. I did some other stuff too. A lot of Matt's lab is basically, if it's under $500, don't ask, just buy it. There's 20 senior scientists at a time, and Matt lets you do whatever you want, as long as you don't. Matt like basically lives on a moon base. He's not concerned with your failure is not going to mess up his life. So he just lets you do whatever, and went pretty wild scientifically. Investigated a lot of super fun stuff. Even like. There's a paper about death fluorescence in worms, where when worms die, a wave of blue fluorescence passes from their head to their tail or something. I like tried to observe this in worms and like make soulless worms via mutation, so like they wouldn't have this blue fluorescence. Like, it was fun. That was a bit speculative, but I couldn't resist doing it. So that's some of the stuff we did. Adenosine ended up being a big focus as well, in kind of a low key thing that. Then worked on that for Darpa biostasis, but that's a long-winded nerd overview of what Matt empowered me to do in his lab. Most aging was figured out in worms. Worms are 1,000 cells that are first genome sequence. They're translucent, so you can see all their organs. They're hermaphrodites that give birth to 200 genetically identical offspring. They live for a month. So most of what I did in Matt's lab, honestly, was I had petri dishes with 100 worms per plate, and I would have like 30 of these at a time. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I would get out my 30 petri dishes, and I would go through each of them with a tiny platinum wire, look through a microscope, poke each worm individually. If it moved, it's alive. If it doesn't move, it's dead. I remove its body and make a mark on a piece of paper, and I would generate like lifespan curves with mutants and RNAi and chemicals to see what genetics and biochemistry controls longevity. I did this like, I think for probably 3 to 5 years, I worked 365 days a year. I would go home for Christmas for under 24 hours. I would make it a point to be back in the lab on Christmas evening. Windowless lab, smelled like bleach and E. coli. I probably poked more worms than it's easy, like a lot of worms.
Is that the Gompertz curve?
I think this is a regular lifespan curve. Gompertz is a more advanced interpretation of this, I think. Great, super fun paper about Gompertz curves, if I remember correctly, is a lifespan machine out of Harvard Systems Biology. Walter Fontana and Nick Strustrup, they looked at Gompertz in particular and investigated whether you could alter, they're looking at vitality as an emergent property. Again, it's Raymond Pearl, rate of aging. Can you actually alter the Gompertz curve, or can you only dilate or contract time? They thought the latter, mostly. They were basically thought they had the empirical support for vitality as an emergent property. It's super deep question, super interesting. One other fun fact, lipoic acid, there's a rat paper that's super obscure. Lipoic acid basically created a metabolic memory of either dietary restriction or a fed state that may be related to Gompertz curve. Super fun topic, but I don't think this is, I think, one level below a Gompertz curve. It's just a survival curve for a population. So, good question.
Just how many of them are alive that are certain?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's super messy. Like worms, they crawl off the plate, so they just disappear. Sometimes their babies hatch internally and eat them from the inside out. So you like open up the plate and there's like, it's called bagging, so it's a bag of worms. Like sometimes they'll crawl halfway out their mom's butt and then like drive their mom's corpse around like a, it's not like, the data emerge clean after time, but it's like, its biology is wet and messy. There's no rules. Evolution happens constantly. It's interesting. Yeah. So
It's amazing content, by the way, like those clips.
Thanks, man. Yeah, dude. The people who gravitate to hardcore academic aging research are characters. One dude I worked next to for years was from Iran. He was like 45 years old, definitely not married, no kids, completely insane. Like he used to sell single cigarettes outside of bars on the drag, like for $1 each, for reasons I do not understand. He was in the Iranian military, was a medical doctor in charge of an entire military hospital in a war zone. Then left there, went to Sweden maybe, got a PhD in molecular biology, was at Einstein in New York, in London, ended up in our lab, and this is like, you'd think this is like the smartest dude in the world. He was a maniac, like probably the most irresponsible person I've met in my entire life. Fun, great dude, but just crazy. Like one time we thought we found a two-headed worm and he lost his mind. It's aging has drawn a lot of kooks over the course of its history, a lot of fraudsters. It also draws a lot of super sincere, motivated people who went against the grain. When I moved to Seattle in 2008, and my family made fun of me. They laughed at me they were like, "Oh, you're gonna be immortal." Nobody's laughing now. Now people come to me and they beg me for the secrets of longevity, and I tell them, no, I'm just kidding. I help people, but you really had to go against the grain to be into this for a long time. Matt and David Sinclair were in Lenny Guarente's lab. There's like a pedigree of like a few seminal labs, and then now there's more. But yeah, dude, aging is the best, but it teaches you a lot of lessons, and Matt is the best for this. About it's awesome to do radical stuff and solve mysteries. That's a phrase Matt always uses: solve mysteries. But when the more radical an endeavor you're in, you have more of a responsibility to build its reputation if it's a serious thing, because fraudsters and kooks can ruin it, and the public will ridicule you. The public ridicules stuff that's new. People say we'd never fly, we'd never do surgery inside the body. They're basically always wrong. It always happens. And aging was like that, so anyway, yeah. that shelf, the middle shelf up there, is just aging books. I've read most of them. I think by the time I left Matt's lab, I had about 20,000 PDFs in my Mendeley, and I had read like a reading. I think is undervalued, but yeah, it's super fun. This is where AI can seriously help. You pump those papers into an LLM, probably some utility there, because you cannot read enough. Like you cannot read enough to know everything. It's so much reading.
How do you ensure that you remember the concepts?
Obsession. If you're obsessed with something,
Do you revisit the paper multiple times, or is it just like you approach a certain paper with so much enthusiasm that it tends to stick?
It's 100% that. So I will obsessively revisit papers. Like I have entire things like this full of papers in my storage unit. Like I just have papers and papers and papers. But I actually heard Huberman talk about this one time. He said like adrenaline is an important part of learning. I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
like every day I'm like on the edge of my seat, and it's like a life or death matter to me. With second degree, like it's not acute, but like, and so it's more important to you than anything. So it sticks. It's like your brain prioritizes it, and you build a web of associations. I think that helps with memory a lot. The more things something is connected to in your brain, the more it's part of a context that helps it stay in place. So, like, you're so obsessed, you're in such a high energy state with such tunnel vision, you remember like, oh, I got that paper from interlibrary loan, I had to go to the supplemental figures, I had to revisit a figure 5, you can see the figure, you're like, that's where the secret is, that's where they exposed like the one thing that nobody...
The more emotions get tied in, the better the memory is.
Yeah.
And I noticed this, like, I used to be really good at ACT reading section, of all sections, and the way I would approach it is, I'd try to genuinely enjoy the story rather than like the questions. I get immersed in the story, and that made me like complete clarity.
That's a big part of the power of this is like, so human history, there's two conflicts, man against nature and man against man. And I would say that the man against man conflict, or human against human, but it's driven by man against nature. Man against nature is scarcity. Biological dysfunction, scarcity. But yeah, if you're starving, you're gonna rob your neighbor and take. Like, it's just the way it is. We're like, James Joyce in Ulysses said, history is a nightmare from which I'm trying to awaken. Like, that is deeply true. We're just emerging from like this catalog of horrors of starvation, warfare driven by scarcity, terrible ideas about science. Like when we started figuring out genetics with Darwin and Mendel, people lost their mind. Biological determinism. They thought, oh, genetics predicts everything, which is, no, they're totally wrong. They went completely off the rails. Like, we're so close now. The atom bomb was the first turning point. Now there's genetics and AI. We're so close. It's like, guys, just chill out. If Devin is telling you not to go to war, you do not, just stop. Like, don't go to war. So this is so great because it's like the fundamental limiter on human life. So like Yanai is from Israel. He's like sick of the war. He's like, this is the war that we're all actually engaged in. The war against biological dysfunction. It's such a powerful rerouting of the desire to hunt, the desire to fight. Like, it's maximally charged with emotion, and it's a unifying mission. It's inexhaustible because once you fix the problems, it becomes a creative endeavor. So it's like, it charges you with meaning every day. It's a worthy fight. It's just super good. Yeah.
By the way, like that clip what you just said about deny